forest was alive with whispers, leaves trembling under a restless wind, birds scattering in sudden panic, and somewhere, a faint, ragged breathing that seemed impossibly fragile against the vastness of the wilderness. In the dimming light, the silhouette of a small girl shivered beneath the skeletal branches, her feverish cough echoing like a warning into the growing shadows. Her father's expensive shoes had long vanished down the dirt road, leaving only the faint imprint of a man too proud, too panicked, to admit he couldn't protect her. And yet among the cold, twisting roots and the smell of damp earth, hope arrived in the shape of a German shepherd, his coat dark, eyes sharp, heart steady. He paused at the forest's edge, nostrils flaring, sensing the tremor in the air, the scent of a child in danger. Every second stretched unbearably long, the girl's breath shallow, uneven, and her small hands clutching the bark of a tree as if it could anchor her to life itself. The dog's growl was low, commanding, not threatening, but a quiet promise. I will find her. I will not let her go. And in that instant, time seemed to bend, the forest holding its breath, waiting for the miracle that was about to unfold. The last rays of sunlight scattered through the forest canopy like shards of broken glass, illuminating the ground in jagged, uneven patches. The trees, ancient and towering, stretched their gnarled fingers toward the dimming sky, casting shadows that moved as if they were alive, breathing along with the wind. Somewhere deep among the roots and fallen leaves, a small girl crouched, her body curled against the cold, damp earth. Her fever had left her weak and trembling, her cheeks flushed with the heat of a body fighting against sickness and the creeping chill of fear. She hugged herself tightly, trying to anchor herself to some semblance of safety, even as the shadows danced closer, threatening to swallow her whole. Each breath was a labor, shallow and ragged, and every cough echoed through the stillness of the forest like a cry for help that might never reach human ears. Her father's footsteps were gone, swallowed by the winding dirt path he had taken in panic, leaving only the memory of hurried shoes imprinting the soft soil. He had been a man of wealth, of confidence, of control, but all of that mattered nothing here in the raw, untamed wilderness. He had made choices born from fear, and those choices had left his daughter alone, her tiny hands clutching at tree bark, as if the rough texture could tether her to life. The forest smelled of wet earth and decay, of moss and rotting leaves, pungent and overpowering to the senses of a child unused to such wildness. Somewhere a distant bird cried, a sharp high note that made her flinch, and a gust of wind carried with it the scent of rain yet to come, mingling with the faint metallic tang of panic. She tried to stand, legs unsteady beneath her, and her head spun with heat and fatigue. Every shadow seemed to bend toward her, stretching across the forest floor in shapes her fevered mind interpreted as predators. She whispered her father's name, hoarse and desperate, her voice almost lost amid the rustle of the leaves. Papa, Papa. Each syllable caught in her throat, each echo dissolving into the heavy air, unanswered, leaving her more frightened, more alert. Her small fingers traced the grooves in the bark of a tree, feeling the roughness bite into her skin, and she imagined, if only he would come back, if only someone could find her, the world might make sense again. But the forest offered only silence, punctuated by the low, constant murmur of the wind through branches, a voice both cruel and indifferent. Then came the scent, faint at first, almost imperceptible amid the overwhelming smell of earth and leaves, but unmistakable to a nose trained to seek, to hunt, to rescue. The German shepherd paused at the forest's edge, ears pricked, head tilted as he inhaled the complex tapestry of smells. Soil, water, decay, and beneath it all, something fragile, human, alone. His muscles tensed, every fiber of his body vibrating with the certainty of purpose. He had been trained for moments like this. A child lost, a life in danger, and the weight of that responsibility settled over him like a second skin. The forest did not frighten him. It was a challenge, a puzzle, a labyrinth to navigate with precision and patience. He sniffed again, drawing in the faint scent that flickered through the damp underbrush like a candle struggling against the wind. Time stretched. The girl, oblivious to the hero approaching, shivered and whispered to herself, pressing her tiny body against the tree as if the bark could shield her from the immense dark wilderness around her. Her mind flickered through memories, her father's laughter, the warm kitchen, the smell of cookies baking, the soft glow of the lamp in her room. But the shadows pressed relentlessly against those fragments of comfort, threatening to pull them away, leaving only fear and cold. She felt tears slide down her cheeks, warm streaks against the chill of her skin, and she tried to wipe them away, frustrated at the weakness she could not fight. The German Shepherd moved silently, paws pressing into the damp earth without a sound. Every step was deliberate, every motion a testament to the years of training and instinct that now converged into a single purpose: to find the girl before the forest claimed her. He paused at a fallen log, nose brushing against the wet moss, drawing in the faintest hint of the scent that had captured his attention. His tail, stiff and controlled, gave a slight flick, a signal to himself that he was on the right path. Every instinct screamed to press forward, to navigate the labyrinth of trees and shadows with precision. The forest seemed to notice his presence. The wind paused in its whispering, the birds ceased their calls, even the rustling leaves stilled as if the world itself waited for the collision between predator and prey, between danger and salvation. The girl, hearing the rustle of leaves, froze. Fear gripped her chest in a vise, her eyes wide and searching, trying to pierce the gathering darkness. For a fleeting moment, she imagined a wolf, teeth bared, eyes glinting in the fading light. Her body trembled uncontrollably, but there was no growl, no threat, only a presence that seemed both immense and gentle, powerful and watchful. The dog stepped into the pool of light cast by a gap in the trees, and their eyes met. The girl's breath hitched. Something deep in her chest shifted, a flicker of recognition she could not name. The German Shepherd's eyes held no menace, only focus, only the promise of guidance, of protection, of unwavering commitment. A shiver ran through her, not from cold, but from the realization that she was not truly alone. The forest, with all its indifference and danger, had been interrupted by a being whose life had been trained, honed, and dedicated to saving hers. He did not bark, did not approach recklessly, but lowered himself slightly, a silent invitation for her to trust, to move, to cling to the possibility of rescue. She took a tentative step, unsteady, trusting in something she had never seen but instinctively understood. Her trembling hands reached toward him, and he allowed her to brush against his coat, warm and solid and real. In that moment, the forest, the shadows, the fear, they all receded slightly, as if acknowledging that hope had arrived. And so in the vanishing light, with shadows stretching and night creeping closer, the first thread of salvation had been cast. The girl's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, the dog's steady presence grounding her, anchoring her to the possibility of life beyond the terror. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and earth, but now mingled with the faint warmth of safety, of loyalty, of courage without words. Somewhere far away, her father ran, guilt and fear chasing him, unaware that the first chapter of their salvation had already begun. The forest, ancient and indifferent, seemed to exhale, giving the world permission to continue, for the fragile life clinging to it had found a protector in a creature as tireless as hope itself. The forest had grown darker now, a shifting labyrinth of trunks and roots, shadows pooling like ink across the ground. Rain threatened in the distance, a low, persistent rumble that vibrated through the air, blending with the tremor of the girl's shallow breaths. Fever still clung to her, hot and unrelenting, making her limbs stiff and untrustworthy. She had tried to move before, only to stumble, her small hands scraping against jagged bark and wet stones. Every step was a negotiation with pain and panic, every breath a reminder of the fragility of her life. Yet she pressed on, guided by instinct, by hope, and by the faint memory of warmth. Her father's embrace, the scent of home, a world outside this shadowed wilderness. Each time she whispered his name, it came out hoarse, catching in her throat, a plea that seemed to vanish into the endless corridors of trees. The German Shepherd pressed forward, paws silent against the damp earth, tail low but purposeful, eyes scanning, ears twitching at every subtle sound. He was a living map of determination, muscles coiled, instincts finely tuned, heart steady in the presence of fear. The scent of the child was faint now, diffused by the dampness of leaves and the soft breeze that shifted constantly. Yet he followed it unwaveringly, a thread of purpose pulling him deeper into the heart of the forest. Every snap of twig, every rustle of leaves became a marker in the complex narrative of survival, the language of the wilderness that only the trained and the desperate could read. He paused, sniffed, turned his head and adjusted, never doubting the importance of his task, never questioning the weight of life resting on his paws. The girl's vision blurred as the fever deepened. Her hands trembled as she reached for roots to steady herself, her body weighed down by weakness, by heat, by the crushing reality of her isolation. Shadows shifted, creating shapes that her mind insisted were moving toward her. breathing alongside her, waiting for her to falter. She wanted to cry, wanted to collapse, yet some stubborn ember of will pushed her forward, forcing one leg after another across the uneven floor. Each step was agony, each stumble a reminder of how alone she truly was. Her voice came again, barely audible, a fragile chant. "A papa papa." She did not know whether she expected an answer or whether saying the name aloud was a lifeline, a fragile tether to a world she feared she might lose entirely. The dog, sensing her distress, increased his pace, moving with an elegant urgency, sniffing, listening, adjusting his path to the subtle variations in scent that betrayed her small, staggering movements. Every instinct he had was a promise, to find, to protect, to guide. He navigated the tangle of fallen branches, the slick stones of the stream, the slick mud that could swallow a small human in a misstep, with precision. The wind carried the faintest traces of her panic, the quickened heartbeat, the shallow, erratic breaths, the tremor in her voice, and he followed it like a compass pointing unwaveringly toward life. Time became elastic. Each second stretched and compressed with the cadence of survival, every heartbeat a drum marking the rhythm of hope and dread intertwined. A sudden gust swept through the trees, rattling branches and whipping loose leaves into a swirling dance. The girl froze, eyes wide, imagining shadows bending closer, fingers reaching for her. Her chest heaved, each breath painful and uneven, a storm within a storm. The dog stopped a few meters away, low and alert, his eyes locking on hers through the dimming light, and in that gaze was a silent message she somehow understood. You are not alone. He did not approach too quickly, did not threaten. He waited, a pillar of calm amidst chaos, radiating a presence that made her trembling form anchor itself against reality once more. Slowly, as if testing trust, she extended a shaking hand, brushing against his thick, warm coat. The sensation grounded her, the tangible proof that salvation could exist, even here among shadows and fear. The rain began, light at first, gentle on the leaves and the girl's hot, flushed skin. It drummed softly against the forest floor, creating a rhythm that matched the steady beat of the dog's paws. She pulled herself along, each movement exhausting, but the pressure of the dog's presence against her side gave her courage she didn't know she had. Mud clung to her clothes, soaking her shoes, making each step heavier, yet she persevered, driven by the silent insistence that she was being found, being guided. Every snap of twig beneath her weight was a reminder of fragility, every hiss of wind a whisper of caution, yet with each step, she felt a flicker of hope bloom within her, fragile but undeniable. In the distance, the outline of a shallow stream caught the dog's attention. He approached cautiously, sniffing the air, ears rotating like radar dishes attuned to the girl's presence. The sound of water rushing over stones was faint, yet enough to mask the human scent in patches, making the dog's work more complex. Yet he did not hesitate. Precision, patience, and instinct coalesced in him, a seamless blend of skill and unwavering determination. He paused by the stream, sniffed, and then barked softly, a sharp, controlled signal, communicating both reassurance and direction. The girl, hearing the bark, stumbled toward the sound, tripping over exposed roots, her small body scraping against the forest floor, yet she did not falter. The sound was a lifeline, a thread pulling her through the dense, indifferent wilderness. By the time she reached the dog, panting, soaked, trembling, and mud-slicked, her body screamed for rest, for warmth, for human presence, yet the animal stood steady, resolute. His eyes held patience, understanding, and an insistence that she follow, that she move forward despite her exhaustion. She leaned against him, letting her weight sink into the warmth of his coat, and felt a moment of peace, fragile yet potent, wash over her fevered mind. The forest, for all its menace and cold indifference, had yielded to a single, quiet force of protection. The first steps of survival had been taken not by a human hand, but by the measured, instinctive actions of a loyal, unyielding dog. Rain fell harder now, drumming on leaves and branches, soaking the girl to the bone, yet she no longer felt abandoned. Her mind clung to the dog's presence, a tether of life, of hope, of unwavering care. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of wet earth, of leaves, of something more, life, possibility, and the quiet promise that she would not succumb here. She whispered once more softly, "Papa, I'm alive." And for the first time, her words were not only a plea, they were a statement, a fragile defiance against the darkness surrounding her. The dog nudged her gently with his nose, a reminder to keep moving, to keep surviving, to trust in the bond that had formed in the whispering shadows of the forest. Through the thickening rain, the girl took tentative steps, leaning on the dog's side, following his silent guidance. Each movement was careful, deliberate, and in that shared journey, the first seeds of hope grew, a connection between human and animal, forged in desperation, in fear, in the raw edge of survival. Somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the storm and shadows, life waited. And now she was moving toward it, carried forward by the steadfast heart of a creature whose loyalty would not falter, whose instinct and courage had become the first whisper of salvation. Rain began as a hesitant drizzle, cold and sharp, striking the forest floor and soaking through the girl's thin jacket. Each droplet clung to her flushed skin, dripping into her hair, mingling with sweat and fever. The forest seemed to shiver with her, branches swaying in a wind that whispered warnings she could barely comprehend. Her small hands gripped at roots, slippery with rain, trying to pull herself forward, each movement a negotiation with exhaustion and the fever that sapped her strength. Her legs shook violently beneath her weight, threatening to collapse at any moment. But the German shepherd pressed close, his presence a solid, unwavering anchor. The warmth radiating from his coat was more than physical. It was a signal, a lifeline, a promise that she could keep moving, could survive, could endure the storm that had descended upon them. The wind grew stronger, bending the trees and whipping loose leaves into a frenzy that brushed against her face and stung her fevered skin. The girl stumbled over a slick patch of mud, catching herself just in time on a gnarled root. Her breath hitched in pain and frustration, a sharp, ragged sound that echoed in the cold air. The dog paused, sniffing rapidly, ears swiveling, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the sheet of rain. He let out a low, controlled growl, not threatening, but a signal that they were nearing something, a subtle communication she could not understand but felt in her bones. He turned his head slightly toward a faint path between trees, waiting for her to follow, and she obeyed, dragging her aching limbs, letting his silent guidance chart a course through chaos. The rain fell harder, a torrential drumbeat on the forest canopy, turning trails into slick rivers of mud and leaves. Her small boots sank, threatening to pull her down, yet she forced herself forward. Fever made the world wobble. Shadows elongated, merging into shapes that her mind insisted were moving, encroaching, breathing. She swallowed back tears, muttering apologies to herself, whispers to the wind, prayers she barely remembered how to pray. Each step was a fight against collapse, a rebellion against the helplessness threatening to claim her. And yet, through the blur of rain and shadows, the dog remained steady, a living compass, a constant in the chaos. His eyes met hers periodically, patient, unwavering, and each glance bolstered her, a quiet affirmation that she was not alone. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the dense forest in jagged flashes of silver and white. The girl's heart jumped violently with each streak of light, her fevered mind imagining the thunder as some monstrous roar, a predator from another world. Yet in those fleeting moments, she saw the dog in stark relief, solid, steadfast, an immovable presence against the chaos. His gaze did not waver. He did not flinch. He moved forward through the rain, paws sinking into mud, ears flicking at distant sounds, nose lifting, tracing the faint, nearly invisible trail she had left. The scent was faint, fleeting, almost lost to the storm. But he adapted, recalibrated, followed the invisible thread that would lead him to her. Each step was careful but relentless, a study in precision, instinct, and loyalty made flesh. Branches tore under the weight of water, snapping with sharp, explosive cracks that made the girl flinch, gripping the dog's fur instinctively. She pressed her forehead against his neck, letting his warmth anchor her, letting the storm rage around them while she clung to the certainty of his presence. Mud and water soaked through her clothes, chilling her fevered body, yet she no longer felt the same despair she had moments before. The dog's breath misted in the cold, a quiet rhythm beside her own ragged inhalation. His growl, soft and controlled, urged her onward, and she obeyed, every step a testament to trust forged in fear. She glanced briefly at the path ahead, trying to discern shapes in the rain-soaked forest. Rocks, roots, fallen logs, all threatened to trip her, to send her tumbling into deeper danger. Yet the dog navigated them with ease, pausing to check, then nudging her gently toward the safest route. The connection between them had deepened into something wordless and profound. In the midst of the storm, she began to notice subtleties, tiny breaks in the canopy that let faint light through, the rhythmic hiss of rain over leaves, the echo of water in a distant stream. Each sound, each movement became a marker, a small compass guiding them through the chaos. Hours, or maybe minutes, time had become meaningless, passed in a blur of rain, mud, and exhaustion. Her fever threatened to overwhelm her, thoughts slipping into half-formed fears and delirium. Yet the dog remained patient, unwavering, an anchor of reality and purpose. He nudged her gently, barking softly when she faltered, his warm coat brushing against her soaking back. She leaned against him, allowing herself to rest briefly, the storm pounding around them, her small body trembling against him. In those moments of pause, she felt a fragile ember of hope ignite, a certainty that they would survive this, that the forest, though indifferent, had been countered by a force she could trust implicitly. As the storm intensified, the dog guided her toward a slight incline, mud slicked beneath her boots. Each step was perilous. She slipped, slid, but he remained close, rushing against her, steadying her, a living hand in a world that had forgotten kindness. The rain blurred the edges of the forest, creating a tunnel of gray and green, and she felt as though the world had contracted, leaving only the two of them moving through it. Her chest ached, her legs threatened to collapse, but the dog's presence compelled her forward step by step through pain and fatigue, through shadow and storm, toward life, toward survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity in the relentless downpour, a faint break appeared in the trees. The wind shifted, carrying with it a lighter scent. Less wet earth, more air hinting at an edge, an opening, a way out. The dog's movements became slightly quicker, more purposeful, and she felt a spark of recognition. A flutter in her chest at the end of this perilous journey might be near. She pressed forward, leaning on him, trusting the silent commands embedded in every step, every glance, every nudge. For the first time in hours, the rain did not feel solely punishing. It became a baptism, a cleansing of fear, a path to something brighter. Through the chaos of wind and water, the girl followed the dog, step by treacherous step, learning trust, resilience, and the quiet power of guidance. The forest remained formidable, unrelenting, yet within its storm-laden depths, hope had carved a narrow, precious path. And as they moved together through mud, rain, and shadows, the girl felt the first stirring of something she had thought lost, the certainty that she would survive, that she was not alone, that courage could manifest in unexpected forms, sometimes in the fur, eyes, and unwavering heart of a German shepherd who refused to abandon her to the storm. Night fell abruptly, draping the forest in a heavy, almost tangible blackness. Rain had ceased, leaving droplets clinging to leaves and branches, reflecting the faint glow of a moon obscured by clouds. Shadows merged into one another, creating a labyrinth that seemed endless. The forest transformed into an ocean of uncertainty. The girl's small body trembled with exhaustion, cold, and the persistent ache of fever. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her muscles screamed, and yet she moved, guided by instinct and by the unwavering presence of the German shepherd at her side. He paused frequently, ears swiveling, nose quivering as he recalibrated the faint scent trail left by her panic, her terror, her life hanging in precarious balance. She pressed her forehead against a tree, leaning into its rough bark for support, closing her eyes for a brief moment of relief. Her breaths came fast and shallow, each one a battle against the sickness that clouded her mind. Delirium flickered at the edges of her consciousness, conjuring grotesque shapes in the darkness. Every shadow seemed animate, reaching for her, whispering threats that were both imagined and terrifyingly real. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to move, to trust, to continue. Though her body screamed for rest and her mind whispered surrender, the forest had become a character in itself, a silent watching entity, one that could both protect and consume. And tonight it seemed to favor the latter. The German shepherd sensed her rising panic, responding with patient, deliberate movements. He brushed against her side, nudged her gently with his muzzle, and in those subtle gestures communicated what words could not. "Stay with me. Keep moving. You are not alone." His eyes caught the faintest glimmer of starlight through the canopy, reflecting determination and focus, and she clung to that, letting his gaze anchor her to a fragile thread of hope. His body was a compass, his presence a lifeline, and every subtle movement reminded her that survival was not just possible. It was being carved out, step by careful step, by his unwavering loyalty. Branches snapped under invisible weight, and the girl flinched violently, Her hands trembled, fingers curling around roots and rocks, seeking stability where none seemed to exist. She whispered her father's name again, softer this time, a question, a plea, a fragile attempt at connection. The forest swallowed. The silence pressed in, oppressive, thick with fear, yet the dog remained calm, patient, his every motion precise. The trail narrowed, the shadows deepened, and the girl's mind threatened to surrender to terror. But he nudged her forward, a steady rhythm against the chaos, a beat that forced her heart to follow, step by careful step, breath by ragged breath. Her fevered vision caught glimpses of shapes in the distance, rocks, mossy trunks, fallen branches, each one magnified, distorted, threatening to trip or trap her. Panic gripped her chest, rising in waves she could barely contain. She stumbled, knees scraping against mud and leaves, and sank momentarily to the ground. The dog circled, positioning himself so she could lean on him, offering warmth, balance, and reassurance. His breath misted in the cold night air, and the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest became a metronome of calm against the storm of her fear. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to rest, letting her forehead press against his side, feeling the solidity of his presence beneath her trembling body. A distant sound broke through the night, a branch falling somewhere deeper in the forest, the scrape of animal movement, the whisper of wind against leaves, and her body froze. Every nerve screamed in terror. She wanted to curl into herself and disappear into the darkness, to give up, to let the forest claim her. Yet the dog's steady stance, unwavering gaze, and silent insistence reminded her that surrender was not an option. He led, she followed, and each small movement became a victory, a defiance against the fear that had threatened to consume her completely. In that shared struggle, something fragile and profound took root. Trust. Trust in him. Trust in the path. Trust in the flicker of hope that had begun to burn in the blackness around them. The path became treacherous as the forest floor shifted under the damp leaves and mud. Roots twisted like serpents, rocks jutted up unexpectedly, and low-hanging branches struck her face and shoulders. She fell more than once, scraping her skin, bruising her body, but the dog remained close, circling, adjusting, his every movement a silent instruction. Keep going. The night pressed in, cold and unyielding, and she shivered violently, teeth chattering, fever still burning hot beneath her damp skin. Yet each time she faltered, he nudged her, guided her, reassured her, and she rose again, fragile but resolute, leaning on his warmth, following his instinct, learning to navigate the darkness one small, deliberate step at a time. The forest seemed endless, yet faint signs of change began to appear. A subtle rise in the air scent, a fresher note carried by a distant breeze, hinted at an opening, an exit, a place where the darkness might finally relent. The dog's pace quickened slightly, not reckless but purposeful, as though sensing the culmination of the struggle. His tail remained low but firm, ears pricked, nose tracing the invisible path through shadows and fallen leaves. The girl, sensing his urgency, summoned the last of her strength. Each step became an act of will, each movement a prayer against exhaustion and fear. The storm had passed, but the forest remained an indifferent, vast opponent, and yet together they pressed forward, bound by a fragile but undeniable trust. At one point, the girl's legs threatened to give out completely, her body collapsing into the mud, her hands clawing at the earth for support. The dog pressed against her side, then nudged her with his nose, circling once, then twice until she rose again. His warmth radiated against her fevered body, steadying her like an anchor in a storm-tossed sea. She followed him blindly, trusting instincts beyond words, letting his presence guide her through the edge of fear, through the forest's indifferent darkness, through the oppressive weight of night and exhaustion. And then finally, just as her body began to falter beyond recovery, a faint glimmer appeared through the blackness ahead. A subtle break in the forest canopy, a hint of lighter air, a whisper of possibility. The dog's movements became sharper, his presence insistent, and she felt the first true flicker of hope since being left alone. Her trembling body obeyed him without thought, muscles screaming in protest, yet fueled by the quiet certainty that salvation lay just beyond the edge of fear. For the first time that night, she imagined warmth, safety, her father's arms, and she took one more step, leaning on the unwavering heart at her side, ready to emerge from darkness, ready to survive. The forest began to thin, the dense shadows giving way to faint moonlight that spilled over a small clearing ahead. The girl, exhausted beyond measure, stumbled forward, knees weak, body trembling from fever, cold, and adrenaline. Mud clung to her soaked clothes, hair plastered to her forehead, but she no longer felt the terror that had dominated her since being abandoned. The German shepherd stayed close, guiding her, nudging her with gentle persistence, a living beacon in the darkness. Every breath she drew was heavy, shallow, yet purposeful. She leaned against him, letting his warmth seep into her chilled body, letting the solidity of his presence anchor her to hope, to life. A rustle in the distance caught her fever-addled mind, and for a fleeting moment, panic surged. Her heart raced violently, and she whispered a shaky "Papa" into the cool night. The wind carried her voice, dispersing it, yet the dog's calm demeanor steadied her immediately. His eyes locked on hers, patient, unwavering, silently insisting, "Trust me." She did. She followed, guided by instinct more than thought, and every step forward felt like a defiance against despair. The forest had been a relentless test, but it had forged something unspoken between them. A bond stronger than fear, more profound than words. Finally, she saw him. Her father's silhouette emerged at the edge of the clearing, bent over, hands on knees, shoulders shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of guilt, fear, and the crushing relief that threatened to break him. His expensive coat was drenched, sleeves muddied, shoes slick with wet leaves. And yet he moved toward her with the urgency of someone who had nearly lost everything. The girl's voice came out hoarse, weak, yet persistent. "But Papa," the word, a fragile bridge across hours of terror, carried the entire weight of her relief, her pain, and her survival. Her father froze momentarily, disbelief and raw emotion etching deep lines across his face, then ran toward her, arms flailing, almost afraid she might vanish again. The dog stepped forward, chest low, ears alert, guarding the fragile human moment unfolding before him. He did not move aside, did not retreat, but remained a protective presence, his gaze flicking between the girl and her father, ensuring her safety while allowing the reunion to unfold. The father scooped his daughter into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, body trembling with the combination of grief, relief, and shame. The girl pressed her face against his chest, fevered hands gripping him, clinging to the warmth and solidity of human touch she had longed for through the night. Rain-soaked hair and muddy clothes no longer mattered. What mattered was life connection and the unshakable proof that she had endured. The father's tears dripped onto her hair, hot and real, and he whispered apologies that she barely heard over the rhythm of her own ragged breathing. "Ooh," she shivered, not just from cold, but from the overwhelming wave of emotion. Fear transformed into relief, despair into gratitude, abandonment into the tender certainty of being found. The dog watched quietly, every muscle relaxed now, every instinct at ease yet always alert. He had completed his purpose. He had navigated darkness, rain, mud, and fear, and now he observed the culmination of the journey, the fragile, powerful resolution that he had carried them toward without falter. The forest, indifferent and ancient, seemed to exhale as if recognizing the closure of its cruel test. The wind stilled, leaves no longer rustled with menace, and the moonlight painted everything in a silver, forgiving glow. The father lowered his daughter slightly, holding her at arm's length to look at her face, brushing mud from her cheeks with trembling fingers. She met his gaze, fever-bright eyes full of exhaustion, gratitude, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the night's ordeal. The dog moved closer, nudging her gently, allowing her to press against him once more, then stepping back to keep watch. His loyalty, his courage, and his patience had bridged the gap between terror and safety. Her father's voice cracked as he whispered, "I'm so sorry, my love. I should have never left you." The girl's lips trembled as she managed a weak, fevered smile, understanding in a child's way that he had been human, fallible, terrified, yet he had returned. She leaned her head against his chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat of someone who had feared losing her forever, and the solid, calming presence of the dog at her side. For the first time since being abandoned in the forest, she allowed herself to believe in safety, in love, and in the strength of quiet, unwavering guardianship. The dog stepped slightly forward, ears pricked as he surveyed the clearing, nostrils flaring at faint scents. The forest, the girl, the father, all converging in this one moment of fragile, precious reunion. His dark eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting a mixture of vigilance and contentment, a silent acknowledgement that his work had created life, restored hope, and mended the first fractures of fear. The girl reached down, fevered fingers brushing his thick coat, pressing against the warmth and strength he had provided. She whispered, barely audible, a thank you, and the sound was carried on the wind, a small human acknowledgement of courage that had no words sufficient to match it. The father knelt beside her, holding both her hands, tracing her scraped, muddy arms with tender care. His breath still trembled, voice catching, as he murmured reassurances he hoped would erase the night's terror. It's okay now, it's over. You're safe, you're home. The girl's small body shivered again, not from cold, but from the tidal wave of emotion that had flooded her, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, gratitude, and awe. She closed her eyes, letting herself be enveloped by human warmth and animal loyalty, the two forces that had guided her through the night's darkness and fear. The forest, now calm, seemed almost reverent, shadows stretching gently toward the moonlight, leaves glistening with rain, roots slick but no longer threatening. The storm had passed, and in its wake lay survival, resilience, and a bond forged in extremity. The girl and her father rose slowly, the dog walking at her side, each step a quiet victory, a movement from despair to life. The clearing opened to the first hints of dawn, and the world seemed to inhale, holding a collective sigh of relief. As they moved together toward the distant edge of the trees, the girl glanced down at the dog. His eyes met hers, calm, deep, unwavering. In them she saw loyalty, courage, and the embodiment of hope. For a moment, the world contracted to that gaze, a silent promise that she would never be alone in the way she had been that night. Her father noticed the look, understanding without words, and he knelt again briefly, placing a hand on the dog's head in quiet reverence. The bond was clear. Life had been saved, trust had been honored, and love had been shown in its purest, most elemental form. And so, under the first pale light of morning, the girl walked from the forest, guided by the steady heartbeat of the dog and the trembling, tearful hands of her father. The storm was gone, the shadows receding, and the world reclaimed its balance, though the memory of darkness would linger. She pressed her small hand against the dog one last time, whispering, "I'll never forget you." And in that moment, life and survival, loyalty and courage, were etched forever into memory. The forest, now silent, seemed to acknowledge the triumph. A child saved, a bond sealed, and hope restored in the most profound, quiet, unwavering way.